Hi everybody, welcome back to another training session. We'll just kick off with some admin again. Oh great. I see Roger's got power, that's always good, load shedding. Great, welcome everybody. I see a lot of you have joined, some very familiar names. Thank you for joining. Let's kick off with some admin. So we've always got some people joining a couple of minutes into the session. So start with admin and then kick off with the training. Great. So if you aren't on the mailing list or if you're not getting any notifications about this training, please join the mailing list. So the very first link I'm going to share in the chat is the mailing list. If you join this mailing list, you will get an email with a link every week to the training. So just a nice reminder in your email inbox about the training. Then another way of getting these notifications or signing up for this training is the meetup events, Joburg Photowalkers. So this meetup link, if you go there, you can join Joburg Photowalkers. If you haven't already, you should. It's all the amazing photo opportunities in Joburg will be on there. Thanks, Mark. Then there's also a WhatsApp group for this training. So this next link, I'm pasting all these links in the chat. This is the WhatsApp group. So, great. I see we've got some people eager to start. We'll start in a second. So the WhatsApp groups for any questions, training related, photography, technical, editing, whatever you've got. You can ask those questions in the WhatsApp. And also weekly, before we do the training, the link goes out on that WhatsApp. So you can choose where you want to join, the meetup group, the WhatsApp group, or the mailing list, or multiple ones if you want. And even during the week, I'm happy to answer any questions on that WhatsApp group as well. Good. We'll give it another second. I see there's still people joining, and then we'll get started. How's everybody doing? Let me know in the chat. Yes, so this WhatsApp group is not the main Joburg Photowalkers WhatsApp group, although obviously you can also ask questions there. This WhatsApp group is specific to this training I'm doing with Joburg Photowalkers. So if you've got any questions, just ask them there. Specifically if it's about anything technical, settings, editing, whatever you need to ask, it's a nice place to ask those questions. You can also send those directly to me. So you can reply to that email that goes out every week. If you reply to that email, it comes to me. I'm happy to answer questions. You can also find my WhatsApp contact details, and you can ask directly if you would rather do that. Great, everybody happy? Then we're going to give it a second and then start. Great, welcome to 5 tips for street photography with impact. Great, let's have a look at my slideshow here. There we go. As we start this presentation, I've put together 5 tips that I've learned over the last how many years of doing street photography. And before I start with the 5 tips, we probably should start one step before that, and that's just asking why. There's a couple of why questions. So the first one is just in general, before editing your images, before taking your images, I'm a firm believer in just asking, why are you doing it? What's the purpose of it? Are you doing it for a client? Are you doing it for yourself? Are you doing it just to improve your photography? What's the reason for you to be picking up your camera and using it today? That sort of gives me focus every day. It just pushes me in the right direction when I'm actually taking images, and puts me in the right mindset. It's just asking why I'm doing it. So that's the first thing, why. The next why that we'll cover is why specifically street photography. So for everybody who's new to, if anybody is new to street photography is exactly that. It's generally going for a walk with your camera, just taking images when you're out and about. It could be in the town you live in, it could be in the suburb you live in, it could be in a city, it could be whilst traveling as well, walking through a city. That would all fall under street photography. Street photography is probably the widest genre of photography because it can cover so many different things, from candid street photography where people are going about whatever they do in the city and you're taking images, capturing specific moments, capturing what's happening in the city. It can also include things where there aren't even people in the image, but the definition of street photography, generally people would say that you at least have to show something where there was, it shows that people were there. So it could be something like a bicycle chained to a lamppost in the city and it's a nice scene or something. So that indicates people as well. It's a street scene. That would be street photography. A lot of photographers will also include other things. So if you're taking an image inside a shop, or yeah, even at events, markets, things like this, indoor events, that would also generally fall under street photography because it's more candid, it's capturing the moment. So it's wide. Not everybody always agrees on what actually falls in street photography and what's excluded, but that's generally street photography. Another thing would be something like street portraits. That generally would be included. So if you stop somebody and ask their permission, somebody you don't know that you just randomly meet, they're looking nice on the street, you stop them, ask them for a portrait, that would generally also fall under street portraits or street photography, although in a subcategory as a street portrait because it is posed or you did ask for permission. Okay, so that's all street photography. Now, why should we be doing street photography? I believe every photographer really should do street photography. For me, it's like going to the gym for photography. I'm a photographer. That's what I do. And I think the one thing that's improved my photography over the last years the most is street photography. So let's say you are a hobby photographer and you can get out 2 weekends in a month to do whatever type of photography you do. Maybe it's wildlife photography, let's say. So that's 2 weekends a month over a year. That's how many images you'll be taking. That's how much time you'll be spent for taking photos, and that's basically all those hours and images added up. That's how much you will improve your photography in a year. Now, if you do street photography, you could have half an hour or an hour on lunch or after work or multiple days a week. You can just go out and take images, take photos wherever you are. You're going to a market on a Saturday morning, you could take your camera along. So this would basically add on thousands of images over a year, hundreds of hours over a year that you're actually taking images. And with street photography, very often the circumstances, the lighting, everything around you, you can't control. You're not posing a model. You haven't got control over what people are doing. You haven't got control over the lighting conditions. So personally, I believe if you can take good street photography images, then working with clients or doing whatever other photography you do is just so much easier. You are practicing your eye, you're practicing setting your camera to the correct settings and making these images. So personally, I think if I can go out on the street under circumstances I can't control and get a good image or a good portrait, that would be so much easier for me than going to maybe a studio and doing a shoot for a client, because then all these other factors are controlled, and it definitely just makes me a better photographer. So that's why street photography. So now we'll have a look at some tips on how to get better at street photography. These are things that over the last few years that I've learned, some of them the hard way, and I think it's important to focus on these and not just some of the things that people would generally focus on when it comes to street photography. Okay, so let's have a look. Great. So the first thing, my first tip is no excuses. I think a lot of photographers would jump in and say, well, this is how you edit a street photograph, or this is how you should compose them. And they've got a lot of rules and things they want to teach you, or settings on cameras, but they're missing some of the basics, some of the steps that we need to put in place even before we look at these technical things and things like composition or settings on cameras and things. And the first one is, I just call it no excuses. So I've had to almost force myself just to take my camera out on a more regular basis. I think it's very important. I think this is where a lot of people just completely miss it. The camera is sitting on a shelf somewhere, and they might be reading tutorials, they might be watching YouTube videos, they might be doing many things where they think they're really improving their photography. But I think the best way to improve your photography is actually by doing it. We're not going to be running a marathon by reading books about how to run a marathon. We have to get out there, we have to be running to get fit to run the marathon. And I think photography for me is very similar. I need to train my eye, I need to get used to my camera, I need to spend more time doing photography to actually get better at photography. And this is where this no excuses rule for myself is comes in. So basically under this, I want to say, do it more. Whatever time you've got on the way to work, lunchtime, on a weekend, when you're out and about doing other errands, just do some street photography. Okay. Then yeah, anywhere. There's no excuses for where you live or the area is not interesting. Go to the park, go to a market, just get out somewhere where you can take photos. With street photography, it really is not about how nice the city is you're living in. It's not about doing street photography in Paris or whatever. Street photography you can do literally anywhere where you find yourself, and you can make interesting photos and practice your photography. There's no bad time of the day. When it comes to landscape photography and things like that, people might prefer specific times of the day. With street photography, you could really do it any time of the day. Middle of the day, harsh shadows, you can get really nice effects with shadows, light and dark areas in photos. There's a lot you can do in the midday. You can do late evening, morning, different weather conditions. Street photography, really, you can adapt to these conditions and still make interesting photos. And then the other thing is there's really no bad gear. For street photography, one of my favorite things is just taking one camera and a lens, and usually an extra battery or an SD card in my pocket, and that's it. I'm not carrying lots of gear with me. I don't need expensive gear. For things like sport photography or wildlife photography, the equipment could be prohibitively expensive for some people. But for street, really, whatever camera you've got and a small lens, that will do it. There's many famous street photographers that use longer focal lengths as well. I know there's a concept for people to say that street photography has to be done with wide angle lenses, although like I said, a lot of the really famous street photographers had normal, very accessible lenses like 50mm prime lenses. That's actually some of the cheaper lenses that you can buy. So yeah, just don't overcomplicate it. There's no excuses about gear. Compact camera, like little small compact cameras, they work very well. No issues. You can put it in your pocket. Like I said, whatever camera you've got will probably be perfect for street photography. Just put one lens on it, don't complicate matters. Even these days, I find myself using mobile phones more. I've always got it with me, and it works perfectly well for street photography. It's not about the gear you've got. It shouldn't be an excuse. So like I said, no excuses. The gear is also not an excuse. Whatever you've got, even your mobile phone, will probably be perfectly fine for street photography. Okay. Next, simplify. So this comes back to the no excuses again. Like I mentioned, even a mobile phone is fine when it comes to street photography. This image you can see, on the screen here, it's been taken with a mobile phone. You can very often also, in places where there might be issues about taking photos with a large camera, with the mobile phone there usually is no issues. You can take mobile phone pictures in places like the Gautrain station, places like shopping malls generally. They're not as worried about cell phones. They're not going to stop you from doing, because they're usually not thinking it's a commercial shoot, which is fine. So just simplify it. Don't overcomplicate your life. Don't take a lot of gear. Either use a mobile phone, use a small compact camera, like I said, or a very simple setup like one camera, one lens. Take an SD card if you want. Take an extra battery if you want, if you're going to be out for a long time. Even a film camera, an old cheap film camera, 35mm film camera, if you like that sort of photography. I often do that as well. Yeah, like I said, don't overcomplicate street photography, because that's when you're going to start missing opportunities, and also it will keep you from actually getting out the door. I found that if I'm overthinking what lens am I packing, and when I catch myself, I haven't even gone out. So if I simplify it and I just leave even like a little compact camera close to the door on my way out, I just grab this, put it in my pocket, and I've got no excuses for getting out and shooting. So that's the next one. Then number 3, do it for you. Just as we get to this one, I mentioned that I sometimes use 35mm film, and this image on the screen now is a film image. So do it for you. I had to take a break from social media for a while. It's very easy to fall into this trap of looking at other street photography online, on social media, on Instagram, on Twitter, and thinking that you should be doing similar things. The trap there is, if you're just following street photography or other photographers on social media, a lot of these guys are actually trying to optimize to get more likes, to get more followers, to build a business around it, and they are shooting in a way and editing in a way to really grab attention, to build that business. But what's also happening is they're all looking at each other's images, and a lot of it starts to look very similar. So I had to, for myself, I had to, for a while, like not use Instagram, for just to get back to shooting more, taking more images, doing it for myself, doing it for the right reasons. I want to improve my photography. I want to grow as a photographer myself, and try new things, experiment. So not worrying about social media, not worrying about what other people think. That's when you can experiment with new things and fail. After which you look at it on the computer and say, well, that didn't work. I don't have to show it to anybody. So it's really important to think why you're doing it, and not do it for likes or for sharing or something, but really doing it, experimenting and building your own style out of this. I think it's definitely, for me, it's just getting out the house, walking around with the camera, talking to people. It's that's what it's about. It's about seeing the city. It's about seeing my neighborhood. It's about seeing different events, going to, like I said, markets, these things. Anytime I can get out, Joburg Photowalkers is a prime example of that. Every time I get back from a Joburg Photowalkers event, it feels nice. I've spent time with other photographers. I've improved my own photography. I got out the house. So that's why I'm doing it. It's not for likes on social media or these things. And I think it's key to remember these little points, because it's very easy to fall into those traps, to edit like other photographers, to do what they're doing, to emulate what they're doing, and just look at social media too much and worry about your own social media too much. And I think there's a few prime examples of really good street photographers, well-known photographers, people that some of the Magnum photographers, for instance, that they just aren't on social media at all. And some photographers like Eric Kim, really good street photographer as well. He made the decision to delete his Instagram because he said it was distracting him from actually doing the work he needed to be doing. So it's something to remember. I don't necessarily think social media is bad. I'm back on social media. It's nice to get feedback. It's nice to spend time there with friends when we can't be close to each other. And it could be a really good community, but I think it's just something to think about and to keep in mind that you're doing the photography for you, and you should be happy. You should be enjoying the process and experimenting, not doing it for other people. Now, the next point is connected to exactly that, and it's don't be a clone. So don't just follow Instagram or social media influencers and photographers and try and copy what they're doing. Try different things, experiment with different things. Just because somebody else is doing something in a very specific way doesn't mean you need to do it in that way. And it's sometimes when a genre of photography, like maybe sport or street photography in this case, sometimes a lot of it starts looking the same because people are influencing each other, and it's a closed group of people just looking at each other's work, and they start editing the same, they start shooting the same, and I don't think that's necessarily healthy. I think new influences and external influences are good. It's art. You should be trying different things. You should be finding your own style. When it comes to getting inspiration, it's great looking at other photographers. When you want to get some ideas of what to do or what's possible with editing, absolutely look at other photographers. But in between all these things, try and find people who are different. Try and find people who are doing things in a different way, that are standing out from the crowd. And then also just do it more often. You'll start finding your own style. Experiment a lot. Try different things. So I think also if you follow any of the larger photographic competitions, you'll see that very often one year a specific style is popular and it wins a lot of awards. The next year everybody is editing and shooting in that style. They're all trying the same thing. So and I think it's something we need to be aware of, where we shouldn't just be following the trends, because if you actually want to stand out, you should be different to what everybody else is doing. Okay. So yeah, exactly. Finding your own style is, to me, very important, and not doing what everybody else is doing, but doing something that gives me pleasure. So when I'm walking in the streets, I like talking to people, and that reflects in a lot of my street photography, where I talk to people and I interact with people, and that makes me happy, and I shouldn't be worried about what other people think about my photos, because I'm doing it for me. Okay. Then the last one that I think is key, that a lot of people miss, is you need to make a lot of bad photos. You need to take a lot of bad photos with street photography. There are some really amazing books of very well-known street photographers and photographers in general, where they publish some of their contact sheets. So a contact sheet, when more people still use 35mm film, was a lot of small pictures when the film was developed, or the negatives were developed, all on one page, and they could then go and pick the ones that they wanted to maybe publish or whatever, or submit for a magazine or whatever they were busy with. So the contact sheet would show all 36 frames on, that was developed from that roll of film. They would have multiple contact sheets from a photo shoot. And looking at some of these amazing, very well-known photographers, you would generally find that they pick 2 or 3 from a roll of film that they developed, 2 or 3 images. The rest is not that good. A lot of them is actually very bad. But there's those couple of images in between there that's amazing. So really, to get to those amazing images, you should just take a lot of bad images. You shouldn't be scared of taking images, getting out. Very often I would spend a day out doing street photography and get back home and really have nothing, and it's okay. And you need to realize that it's okay. and not think that every single photo you take should be amazing. And again, getting back to social media, when people post photos on Instagram, it's the one photo of the week or the one photo of the month that's amazing that they're posting. They're not posting the other 800 or 1,000 bad photos they took, or the experiments they did before getting to that amazing photo. So you shouldn't be scared of taking bad images. You're learning, you're experimenting, and that's definitely a thing that I think is super important. Okay, next one. Now we're getting to the last one, and you'll notice the only one that's really talking about technical aspects of photography. So there's a reason why only one of my 5 tips is actually talking about the technical side of photography. I think if you get out more, if you take more images, if you get to know your camera really well, so spend time with your camera. Don't replace it every few months or every year. Take a couple of years with the camera. Really know where all those buttons are. Know what the camera is capable of. Just take more photos. That's going to improve your photography a lot more than me telling you what settings to use for your autofocus, or me telling you how to compose a better image. I think looking at your own photos afterwards, going through them, asking yourself, what's good about this one? What's bad about this one? What can I do better? What did I miss today? What image couldn't I get that I actually wanted to get? That's going to improve your photography more than any of the technical things. But we will, for tip number 5, look at a couple of technical things. So my tip number 5 is use all camera modes. So you bought your camera, it's got all these modes. Can you see my modal right there? Got all these modes on this modal. Okay? The manufacturer built them all in. I couldn't get any discount by only having manual. I've got all these modes and I paid for them. Why not use them? When I was quite new to photography, an experienced photographer once told me that you need to know manual mode. That's when you're a photographer. And in a lot of circumstances, I would agree. Using artificial lights, shooting in studio, I'm in manual mode. That's the best mode for me to deliver a good image to my client and under those circumstances. But I think what a lot of people miss is there's no best mode all the time. All these modes exist because some of them work better at specific times and getting specific results. Okay. When I've got a lot of time, when I'm setting up an image, or when I'm based in one spot, even with street photography, and there's a very specific look I want, maybe there's a shadow and a beam of light or something coming through, and I'm just waiting for somebody to walk through to get that composition, I might be on manual mode, and I might lock in all my settings, and even my focus I might lock in a specific point while I'm waiting, and that would be the applicable mode for that time. But when I'm walking around, I also often use shutter priority. Shutter priority walking around in the street, and especially maybe when you're going in and out of darker areas, maybe you're going in and out of buildings, you're at a market, you're walking into shops, walking out of shops. Shutter priority will very often be a good mode to be in, because you'd be able to set it to a shutter speed that will freeze people walking around. So maybe nothing slower than about 125th of a second, I would say, if people are walking around. It depends on your lens, and it depends on how close people are to you. So people walking past very close is actually in relation to your camera moving faster. Somebody's further away and they're walking, it's actually slower in the frame, but or in relation to where you are. But something like, let's say 1/100th or 125th, somewhere around there would be my sort of slowest shutter speed I would choose when people are moving slowly. Things are moving faster, sporting events and things, obviously you want to go higher, maybe 1/500th or something, or higher than that. So the shutter speed allows me to control, to freeze action. But what it also does is when I want to pan, there's maybe a cyclist coming past, I might drop my shutter speed to 1/60th or 1/50th, and then I can pan with the cyclist and get a blurry background. So that's when I use shutter priority or TV time on the Canon cameras. Aperture priority. Generally, I leave my aperture set for aperture priority in the lowest my lens can go. I like prime lenses, so this is 1.7. So I would just set my aperture priority on 1.7. And the only time when I'm walking around, when I would go to aperture priority is if I'm doing a street portrait. Then I might want to get a bit of a more blurry background. Okay. So there's a time for that. And I would leave all these modes set up. And as I walk around, I would just flick between the appropriate modes, and I know I can press the button and get the shot. So I might leave my shutter speed at 1/60th if I'm out in the street and I might want to pan. I might leave my aperture on aperture priority at maybe f1.7 if that's the appropriate one for a portrait. And when I stop somebody for a portrait, I just flick my modal to aperture, and I know I can take the portrait without wasting anybody's time. And then the one that a lot of people forget about and never use is P. So program auto. P is actually a really amazing mode to use for street photography. I use it often. So if I'm walking around, before I drop my camera on the sling, before I let go of it and it's just hanging around my neck or at my hip, I very often would just flick my modal to P. It's program auto. It's a really almost fully automated mode. It's very similar to auto, except it won't, if you've got a camera with a little flash, it will never pop up that little annoying flash. And you can, with program auto, also adjust the shutter speed if you want with in this case on the back dial, but I generally just leave it in whatever the camera wants to do. So it's a very auto mode. The nice thing by just leaving it in P, hanging next to me or on my hip, I'm walking around, something's happening, something really fast. There's just split seconds to get something. I can pick up the camera and press the button, and I've got a well-exposed photo. I'm not worried about background blurs. I'm not worried about having full control. I'm worried about being able to very fast catch something that's happening. So that's when I'm on program auto. So personally, I've paid for all these modes. I'm allowed to use all these modes. I'm not a better or a worse photographer because I'm shooting in auto modes as well as manual modes. I think knowing which mode is applicable and knowing my camera is more important than just trying to catch everything in manual mode, although I'm happy working in manual mode when I've got the time, but I know it will slow me down a bit. And if something's happening and it's moving past me, it's happening in the city, it very often does. If you spend a lot of time and hours out walking with your camera, you'll find that stuff happens out there. That's life. And so generally, like I said, when I'm just walking around, my camera is in P, program auto. As soon as I stop somebody for a portrait, I would just flick my modal to aperture. If I want to do a panning shot, or I'm indoors where I need to where there's lower light and I need to freeze motion still, where my camera on auto mode might go to a too slow shutter speed, I would just use shutter priority. And then when I've got time, when I want to really do something maybe a bit more artistic, work with the shadows and the highlights, and I'm stuck in one spot for a while and I'm waiting for something, then I might go to manual. Okay, so knowing my camera and just being able to flick this dial, and I know my settings are all correct, that helps me a lot. Okay, so like I said, you've paid for all those modes. They're yours. They're on the camera. You didn't get discount for having less modes. Use them under the correct conditions, and know when to use them. So that's basically the tip number 5. Use all your camera modes. Like I said, you paid for them. Then the last one, I've got a bit of a bonus tip for you: inspiration. So we already talked a bit about social media and what I think is actually a bit of a negative with social media. Although if you use it wisely, I think it can be beneficial. Just make sure that you're using it to your benefit and not for somebody else or somebody else's benefit. Make sure it's a tool make sure you get from it what you need, and not get too much influenced by what's happening there, or likes and things. But yeah, so we're talking about inspiration now. If you say that you shouldn't probably be spending all that time looking at 50 photographers all editing in the same way, what should we be doing? Where should we be getting inspiration? And I've got a few ideas for you. So one is books. I love photo books. It's something that and I've got a tiny little one here. It's Elliot Erwitt's Paris. Just as an example, you don't need to always buy the big coffee table books, the big expensive ones with the glossy pages and the amazing images. And you sometimes get like small little, this isn't even a hardcover, it's a soft one. But Elliot Erwitt, for instance, is one of the most amazing street photographers. I love his work, or used to be. He used to work in Paris, and his images are absolutely amazing. By today's standard, his camera was terrible. It was a 35mm camera with a pretty soft lens, and if you compare with what we've got now in dynamic range and megapixels and things, his camera was not as good, but his images are absolutely amazing. I love looking at them. I love what he did. And a similar thing with many other books. There are so many incredible photographers out there, and a lot of them publish books, and it's just a great accessible way. You don't have to buy a big print to put on your wall. You can generally buy a book for a lot less, and I think it's a better investment in most cases than buying gear. So just getting back to gear, what you need for street photography. Personally, if you're thinking about cameras holding you back or lenses holding you back, from experience, I probably have to say it might not be. Some people get some inspiration from buying a new piece of kit, and it inspires them to get out the door. They've got a new lens, now they have to use it, and they get out the door and they use it. That's fine for them. Personally, I think I would rather keep my camera a year or two longer and spend that money maybe on photo books, on workshops, on traveling. I think sometimes you get inspired with street photography, just doing a tour or a trip, or getting to a different city, or even booking a touristy tour in your own city is money better spent than buying new kit. So because we're living in a day and age where even our cell phones can take good photos, I think rather spending that money on photo books, visiting galleries, art galleries, it's an amazing, inspiring place to go. You can get amazing ideas for your photography looking at other things like sculptures, like paintings. There's lots of things you can pick up from paintings, let's say, in how they use colors, and you could apply it to your photography, composition, all these things. You don't necessarily have to be on social media to get all these all this inspiration. You could even look at a movie, your favorite movie, or one of the latest movies. Look at how they use color, look at how they edit, how they color grade, how they frame specific shots. Go back to scenes that you like and pause it and have a look at it. Look at the lighting, look at different components of your favorite movies, or whatever your favorite one is this week, a series. That's all inspiration you can get from other places. That's not just looking at the same photographers over and over. Because if you follow the same couple of photographers on social media, what I've seen with myself, if I keep looking at their work, over time my work starts looking like their work, and I don't think that's a healthy thing. So I want inspiration from lots of different places, also from places that's not photography, so that I can evolve and get my own style. Look at other artists that work in different mediums completely, and think how you can apply it to your photography. And then there's one website that I think is worth mentioning, and it's a photography website. If you don't know Magnum, it's one of the most famous, well, some of the most famous photographers ever belong to Magnum. Magnum they've got a really good website, and just browsing through some of those images. And it's images that date back quite a long time. So looking at what people did 20, 40, 50, 60 years ago, and how they composed, even with the cameras and the lenses they had, how did they compose good images with limited gear that couldn't do things like auto focusing or auto exposure and things? How did they get amazing shots? So just browsing through a website like Magnum, I think, is also, if you can't get to photo books or buy photo books, that's also beneficial. But make sure you think about the influences that you're putting into your work and how you're going to move forward with those influences, and not just be following the crowd in your specific genre of photography, but trying new things and be inspired by all these other things that's happening. Then questions. We get to questions. Has anybody got questions? And I'm happy also to answer technical questions. If you've got any technical or setting questions for street photography, I'm happy to answer those. I know I said it's not the most important thing, getting out there and using your cameras, but if you've got any technical questions, if you've got questions about any of the photos you saw, whatever questions, I'm happy to answer them now. So you love shooting people and you're afraid of taking pictures of strangers on the street. How do you overcome it? Okay, that's so. There's a couple of things when it comes to street photography. I love talking to people. I love stopping people on the street. But I'm a bit of I'm definitely I had to work on it. For many years I wouldn't have talked to people on the street. I'm definitely an introvert when it comes to these things, but over time I got used to just speaking to strangers. So for one, if you're doing candid street photography, so you're taking an image, let me just get it this way. So if you're taking an image of something that's happening on the street, somebody's walking somewhere, something's looking good, the framing is good, and there's just a person in the image, that's a candid image. You're just taking the shot without their permission, obviously. And the other side of it is actually stopping somebody and asking them to take a portrait. So we'll cover both. The first thing is, if you're walking around in the street just taking photos, and you're doing candid photography, and somebody could be in the photo and you're worried about somebody's reaction if they see you taking this image, the first thing is, if they're not the main focus of the photo, or if they're not really recognizable in the image, then I think it shouldn't be an issue. If they're closer up to the frame, personally, for myself, I would just be very confident and not look like I'm worried about what I'm doing. So how to say that in a different way? I think if it looks like you are worried and if you're afraid, that comes across in your posture, the way you handle yourself, and people will notice you, and it will they would immediately be alerted to something is wrong because this guy is sneaking around taking photos. So I would just walk around like a tourist would with my camera. I would walk with it openly. I would not hide my camera and quickly pick it up to take a photo. I would walk with it in my hand. I would show everybody around me that I'm taking photos, and I would do it in a way with confidence and not trying not to look afraid to be caught out or something, because there's nothing wrong taking photos of people. And if somebody really complains, I can delete the photo. I can talk to them, explain to them what I'm doing. I've done many years of this, and in a very limited few cases, somebody has complained, and generally just showing them that you're deleting the image solves that. Legally, you don't have to, but legally and ethically, I think, is two different things. I want to not, I don't want to upset people in the street. People are doing their thing, they're going about their business, they're going to work, they're going to meet family. I don't want to upset them. That's me personally. I want people to look good in my images. I want people to feel good about it. If they see any of their images afterwards, they should be happy about it. So I want to portray people in a good light, and I'm confident that that's what I'm doing. So I'm not going to be hiding the fact that I'm taking photos. I'm going to be open about it. I'm going to show that I'm confident that I'm not doing something wrong. So that's the first thing when I'm doing candid photos. And being happy too when somebody confronts me to talk to them about it. That's the first one. The second one is if you want to do street portraits. To me, that was actually easier than doing candid, because candid, sometimes somebody looks up, you're taking a photo, somebody is sitting somewhere, whatever, you're taking a photo and they look up and realize you're taking a photo of them. So that could be part of why you're feeling afraid. You're afraid of being caught taking that image. And one way to solve it is the way I did, is for a long time, I would just walk up to somebody who's interesting or doing something interesting, just straight out ask them if I can take a photo. I would have my camera and I would point to it and say, do you mind if I take a portrait? Sometimes they'll ask why. Once in a while they'll say no, but it's okay. If they don't want their photo taken, I respect that, and I move on, and I don't have to have that one. For me, getting permission makes it a lot easier. And I know it's not candid street photography like a lot of people think. That's the core and essence of street photography. But to me, I would rather speak to somebody and meet somebody nice, and maybe offer to send them the image on WhatsApp afterwards. Or I would rather have that experience with somebody and be happy and they're happy than just sticking to the core and essence of candid street photography in this case. I do some of that, but I love talking to people. And one little tip is, if you're worried and you're trying to get into actually stopping somebody and asking them for a photo, a good way of starting is, so let's say I go to a specific area. Let's say Friday morning I'm going to go to Rosebank and walk around and take some photos. I like public transport, so I might take the Gautrain or the Gautrain bus there, things like that, and just get out at a place that looks interesting. I would walk around with my camera, and for the first few minutes, I would just have my camera hanging around my neck or my waist, and openly have the camera, but I would walk around and just greet people. I would just go, good morning, how are you? And walk around for 10 or 15 minutes, just getting into the mood of talking to people around me. Because most people don't do that. Most people are very surprised when a stranger actually greets them or asks them, how are you? So I would do that for a couple of minutes, just to get into the mood of I'm interacting with people. I think that's a good way to start. And then I would look for somebody who I think won't be intimidated when I actually stop them. So generally, maybe somebody my age, my gender. So I would look for somebody for my first portrait of the day. Even though it might not be a very interesting portrait to me, I would look for somebody who's not going to be intimidated when I talk to them. So I would walk up to somebody maybe with a nice shirt on or a red tie or whatever it is, and I would generally do something like, I would greet them and say, you're looking amazing, do you mind if I take a portrait? And then once I get that first one out of the way, it's easier to move on from there. But it takes a lot of practice, and again, reading books or watching videos, that's not really going to do it. You have to get out, start doing it. So you need to get into a habit of just talking to people around you. Even when you don't have your camera around, just greet people in the street. It doesn't happen often enough, and people are surprised, and actually pleasantly surprised, when you just greet them and randomly in the street. So and it takes practice. It takes a lot of practice not to feel that you're doing something wrong when you're walking around taking pictures in the street, because you're not. And again, connected to that, I don't take street photos of stuff where I'm going to make somebody look bad, or show them in a bad light, show them on a bad day, or capture something that's negative. I personally, for my own street photography, I refuse to do that. I'm not going around the city taking images of people that are down and out on their luck. I don't think it's good for me to benefit by getting an emotional photo of maybe somebody who's living on the street or something. That's not my job. If, for instance, I feel the need, or there's a specific issue maybe in the city, let's say homelessness, I would rather work with an NGO that's involved in that and deliver my images to the NGO, or if they are going to be doing an awareness campaign or something, it's not for me to do. I think there's specific organizations that can do really good work, and we as photographers can support them and work with them to highlight a specific issue, but it should be going through their channels, I think. Or if it's a newsworthy issue, if there's something happening and it's bad and people should know about it, working through a news outlet, a magazine, a newspaper, as a photographer for them, I think that's the way to go to cover a story that needs to be told. But I'm not going to do it as my own street photography. I'm not going to benefit personally from that. I'm doing it to either support a story or a news story or an NGO. And so those negative things and showing people in a negative light to highlight that, I think should be handled in different ways and not in normal street photography as part of a portfolio or as part of something I share on Instagram to just get some likes because of somebody else's misfortune. I think that's wrong to do it. Photographers are amazing, and there's photographers covering wars, famine, whatever, pandemics. There's photographers covering all these things, and these things should be told. But I don't think it should be part of my personal work as such. So always making sure that I'm portraying people in my personal street photography as positive and showing them in the best light possible. Not light as in shadow light, I mean portraying them in the best way I can, is part of why I've got the confidence of walking around with my camera taking images. I'm not sneaking a photo of somebody who's had bad luck. I'm focusing on people that are looking good, that are having a good day, and that's the sort of street photography I like capturing. So that gives me the confidence of stopping somebody and saying, hey, do you mind, can I grab a photo? So I hope that answers it. But so there's many levels to it. Your motivation is sort of the bottom layer where everything builds up. Getting some confidence and being able to stop people and giving them a compliment and tell them why you want that photo. Sometimes I would, one little trick that I sometimes use is somebody might be sitting on a bench and it's just a nice scene and something's looking nice. They're busy doing something and I just like it, but I need to get close and I know they'll spot me and I don't want to get caught out. I would actually sometimes just walk closer to them and tell them, ignore me, I'm not here. Take a step back and take the photo. And most people will actually be surprised and they will ignore you until you're done and then start chatting to you. And that's one way of doing it, sort of making a joke about it. But there's many ways and you need to find your own way that suits your personality. Some street photographers just focus on wider scenes. They never get close to people and they're happy doing it that way. There's a part of street photography that works for everybody. Okay, so next, if you have to choose one prime lens only, what focal length would it be? That's a really tough one. So I know most street photographers I know would go for something between a 24 and a 35 prime. So they like wide and they like being close. And I think in cities like New York and with the subways and things like that, there's a good case to be made for wide lenses because you're really close to people. What I found in South Africa and even in Johannesburg, even in the CBD, you're actually further away from people than you would be shooting in a place like New York, where the sidewalks are packed with people and there's a lot more people. So to isolate one person, you can be quite closer. In South Africa, I think for me that I like a little bit more narrow lens. This specific one I absolutely love. It's a 40mm equivalent lens. It's like a little prime pancake. Most brands of cameras or lenses would have something similar to this. So a pancake lens that's about a 40mm equivalent in full frame. I love this lens. For me, it works really well with street photography. But sometimes, and I like doing it actually more often than not, is I would swap this for my other favorite lens, which is it's a portrait lens, so like an 85mm equivalent in full frame. Because I like stopping people and doing street portraits, that 85mm-ish focal length is actually for me also quite good, which is not common in street photography, but I like that. I like what it gives me. And what I found in South Africa with our streets, the width of our normal streets in the city, if I'm using an 85mm from across the street, shooting towards, let's say there's a nice door, a building's got an archway and a wooden door or something. I'm waiting for somebody to walk on the opposite sidewalk in front of that door, and I've got a nice frame. That 85 equivalent from across the street actually works really nice. So you get a piece of the building with the archway and the doorway and somebody walking through that scene from across the road. That's something that I like doing. So yeah, 85 or 40. If I had to choose only one, probably a 40. Okay. A 40 is a little bit more versatile. You could do portraits if you wanted. You could also do wider street scene. Any more questions? Settings, anything you need to know or you want to know? I'm happy answering any more questions. Everybody good? What I could do, if anybody's still interested in staying a couple of seconds longer, is I'm just going to quickly go back to my PowerPoint presentation here, or my keynote presentation in this case. Just quickly tell you what I've got here. So this is digital. This camera was this image, indoors, Keys Art Mile. The light was just nice, and that's it. I like that shot. Edited in black and white. I edited to be grainy and looking like film. Next image. Let's go to the next one. Out in Maboneng quite a few years ago. I think this was on a Joburg Photowalkers walk. Actually, the previous one was as well, Joburg Photowalkers. I just like this scene. Quick shot. I think this was in P mode, so program auto, because I didn't have time. There was cars moving. I just saw this and quickly pressed the button. Rosebank side. This was also my normal digital camera. This was my cell phone, edited in black and white. It doesn't look like cell phone as soon as I edited it out in a bit of a grainy black and white. I've posted this a couple of times in different places. Nobody's ever asked me if it was a cell phone image. I've only had people say, give me compliments on it. I don't generally post that it's a cell phone image because I think it doesn't matter. So I post an image because it's a nice image. I wouldn't sort of excuse something about it and say, oh, it's only I think a cell phone image is a legitimate photo. So when I post, generally, when I post the cell phone image, I just post it as another image. If somebody asks me, obviously, different. But anyway, cell phone image. This was 35mm film with an old film camera, a really cheap film camera I picked up in like a little pawn shop in a small town, and lovely image. This one was film as well, again on a film camera with 35mm film in the CBD. Just like the colors, all the colors just work together, and the little bag that says I love Africa, love that. This was a street portrait. This camera, I just stopped this guy. He looked amazing. I loved his look. I chatted to him for 5 minutes even before. He really nice guy. I've met him a few times again because he actually owns a local business in Marshalltown. I've chatted to him a few times there, yeah, so nice getting to know somebody in the city. And I took a portrait of him on that first day, and every time I see him we have a nice chat. So this is one of those cases where I see somebody and I know I have to stop them. Then this one, film camera, again, getting my timing and everything right was quite tricky. This is Santon, and I just like the look of it, the way the guy was dressed, and the contrast with the black and white, and getting the timing with an old film camera where I couldn't shoot high-speed bursts or anything. I wanted his foot with that triangle, so I wanted his 1 foot just about to touch the pavement, so I had to get my timing perfectly, and it worked out. More often than not it doesn't, but in this case it did. So I just like the shape of where his legs are with this bull in the foreground. I think the black and the white, the shirt and everything worked well. Next one, I saw the reflection and I waited for a while. I picked my focus point and my settings, and I just basically waited until somebody walked past, because I think it just adds a bit of interest. And I had my camera really low down to get the reflection, and what that also allowed me to do is to get that the person walking in the back, so their head and the hat is actually framed against the sky. So if my angle was higher up, well, firstly, I would lose some of that reflection, but what I would also lose is that person would blend into the background. By lowering my camera, I could get their upper body against the white background, and they're a bit of a silhouette with this exposure. So you see that form of a person that your eye can easily identify as this is a person. So it's just another point of interest in the image. And we are at the finish. I hope that helps. If anybody has got any other questions, you can either post them here now, or in the WhatsApp group, or email me, WhatsApp me direct. I'm happy to answer any questions. If anybody wants to go for a walk at any time, well, firstly, join Joburg Photowalkers, because it's amazing opportunities for taking photos with other people, getting tips from other people. And again, I know both me and Mark on any of the walks, please ask if you've got any settings issues, or you need to know anything. We don't know everything, but if we know, we will absolutely help you. We're happy to help. Good. So if there's no more questions, we're going to call it an evening. Going to give it 2 seconds, and then we're going to finish off. Okay, let's hop back in. I'm seeing a question. I like the question. Would I bring a tripod? I wouldn't. So if it's daytime, if there's enough light, I think it slows me down. I think it limits my opportunities. So modern digital cameras, a lot of them have got like screens that can flip out. I love that. I can go low, I can go up high, I can move around, I could frame stuff with something in the foreground. So question about a tripod, daytime shoots, I would not. No. I think it limits me to one point of view. It limits me to where I put that tripod. I'm going to try and make that image work, instead of, especially with the prime lens, I should actually be walking closer, further, left, right, get my framing, get the scene to look more interesting. So I like moving around with my camera, and I think a tripod forces me to be static, which I don't think is good for my street photography. So no, personally, I don't take a tripod for street. For a night photo of the moon, different story. Next, use a 35mm Fuji. Oh, nice. I like the old film cameras a lot. Sometimes by forcing me to slow down, winding it and focusing it manually, I think it makes me think about what I'm taking the image of. And yeah, so I like film. But we live in an amazing time where even our mobile phones can do amazing things. So don't forget about that. Don't get caught into the whole film is better than everything debate. I think there's a time and a place for it, but use the tools you've got. Don't think that you need a film camera to do street. You've got it, use it by all means. But whatever you've got is probably good enough. So yeah, just have fun with it. And I do say I do enjoy using film, so I try to often use it. Great. Card light streaks and waterfalls with ND filter. Mark, you've got it. Mark is saying that he likes to use a tripod for car light streaks and waterfalls blurring with an ND filter. I get it. absolutely, it's amazing for that. If that's your style, if that's what you're going for, then take a tripod. What I have found is very often in the city you can also find something to just rest the camera on. It's making a plan, and even sometimes just pushing it up against the wall, I can get a couple of seconds of exposure without blurring it. Resting it on a pole, street pole or something. You can get quite innovative, I think, if you need to. But yeah, so light streaks and waterfalls blurring with a tripod, absolutely. If you, like I said, if that's the style, if that's what you like doing, by all means do it, and don't just copy my style. Personally, I like being mobile. Great. I think that probably concludes the questions. Thank you all for joining. I really appreciate it. And like I said, if there's any questions, just WhatsApp or email, happy to answer them. And I'll see you next week.